Author Donna J. Jodhan presents the Christmas Box Set number 2. If you have not yet listened to Donna's 12 Days of Christmas Box Set number 1, then you owe it to yourself to do so. This box set is made of 12 wonderful stories for the Christmas holiday season. They are all filled with mystery, suspense, and they all have happy endings. Now, Donna presents her second 12 Days of Christmas box set, 12 stories with wild imaginings. Donna paints pictures of hope, peace, and a bright future for the world. She develops amazing stories that will warm and thrill the hearts of the listener. Sit back now and enjoy Donna's 12 stories. You can email your thoughts and feedback to Donna at donnajodhan@gmail.com. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everyone.
Hey everybody, ho ho ho, it's Detective DJ, also known as author Donna Jodhan, and I am here to share the 8th episode of my 12 Days of Christmas box set number 2. We're moving along here, and I hope that you have had some time to listen to at least one of my previous episodes, and I also hope that you are having a great time with your holiday season, celebrating, greeting, sharing, lots of joy and peace and everything. And I'm just going to let you know what my previous 7 episodes have been, and hopefully you'll find time to listen to at least one of them, okay? All right. So the first episode was Santa's Special Christmas Sleigh. The second one was called The President's Christmas Package. The third was called Santa's Super Christmas Kids. The fourth was called Santa's Magic Marvels. Number 5 was The President's Christmas Ice Palace. The 6th one was called Santa's Super Christmas Dream, which I really enjoyed writing and producing, and I hope that you find it very exciting and very, entertaining. And the 7th was called Santa's Super Sea Rescue. So now we're on to number 8, and this one is called The President's Christmas Cruise. Here is a description to it. President Marco Sumner and his friends decide to take a Christmas cruise for the Christmas holidays. And the kids are so excited to be going along with their parents. And the parents are very excited to be planning something very special for them. So, President Marco has designed and developed his own ship with the latest and greatest devices that he could think of. And it's everything that he could provide. They set sail on a starry night on an ocean that is as smooth as glass. Everything is ready. All kinds of toys and goodies for everybody. And it is going to be a holiday for the family that they plan to enjoy. But don't you know it? Something happens midway through the cruise, and Marco and Nicholas are forced to call for help. It is Christmas, and as it is Christmas, it is very difficult to find any kind of help. Some very unexpected help suddenly arrives, and before you know it, the Christmas cruise is saved. Find out how Christmas morning is celebrated at sea. Who is there to celebrate? and all kinds of surprises for everybody. Part 1. Meet the kids. Oh my gosh. These kids have been growing up very fast indeed. They all reside at Bobbin Square, a huge community complex that is known worldwide for who lives there and what goes on. Any kid in the world would give their eye tooth to be living at Bobbin Square. Yes, indeed, any kid. And to be the child of any of these two high-profile dads. President Marco Sumner, who heads one of the world's largest toys and games conglomerates, and his best friend Nicholas Gleason, also known as the Mighty Magician, because of the fantastic devices that he continues to develop and produce. It has all been about the famous dads. But how about some spotlight on the kids? Meet Nicholas Sumner, better known as Little Nick. He is the eldest son of Marco and Chelsea Sumner, and he was named for Nicholas Gleason, aka Big Nick. Little Nick is 16, generous, bright, and very curious, and always looking for new adventures. He has a soft spot for those in need, and he loves working with his dad and Big Nick. He says that for now, he does not want a girlfriend. Too many headaches, he says. Meet Little Nick's twin brother and sister. Scotty and Shay are 14. They were born close to Christmas Day and are considered by the family to be the perfect Christmas presents. Scotty loves sports, plays ice hockey and football, and he also spends time building model ships and model planes. He's a good student, but Mom and Dad often need to curtail his time on his eye devices. Scotty loves watching his dad and Big Nick at work, but is still to show some interest in what they do. Shay is a loving kid. She loves to play with the other kids at Bobbin Square and is the perfect mentor and tutor to the other kids. Shay has taken an interest in piano playing, plays chess, and enjoys cooking along her mom, Chelsea. Meet Big Nick's kids. First, there are Kristen and Tristan, two wonderful sons that were adopted by Big Nick and his wife Jane after their own parents were killed in a plane crash. They are the sons of Jane's sister, Xenia, and her husband, Ryan, who were killed in a plane crash. Kristen is 17 and Tristan is 15. They both get along very well with Little Nick and Scotty and Shay, and they enjoy working with Marco and Big Nick whenever they are not too busy with schoolwork. And then finally, there are Big Nick's and Jane's youngest kids, little Marco, who is 12, and Alexa, who is 10. These two rabble-rousers are always getting into something new, and they enjoy going off on their own. And they have lots of fun and adventures. All of the kids get along superbly, but they have all spoilt Alexa, not because she's the youngest, but because she is vision impaired. And she seems to have inherited her dad's eye condition. This has not prevented Alexa from growing up as normal as can be. She loves hanging out with her brother little Marco and with Shay, who has become her mentor and confidant. Now the kids are buzzing with great excitement because their parents have told them that they will be going on a very special Christmas cruise, and that several other kids and friends of the families living at Bobbin Square will be joining them. This is going to be so very special because the kids have never been on the cruise, nor have the other kids at Bobbin Square. Bobbin Square is buzzing with excitement and anticipation, and Marco and Nicholas are making sure that those left behind will also have lots to look forward to for the Christmas holiday season. It is mid-November at Bobbin Square, and all of the store windows have already been decorated. Shelves are packed with lots of toys, games, and crafts. The streets are filled with fragrances of cakes and pies and all other Christmas goodies that are being baked. The ice rinks are already open for the skaters. Many trains and trams are traveling along the streets, and choirs are already hard at work, practicing for those concerts at those quaint little churches. Yes, Bobbin Square is very much alive with the Christmas spirit. And while this is going on, Marco and Nicholas and their families have a very special Christmas cruise to plan and execute. They have made very sure to ensure that every kid living at Bobbin Square has had an equal opportunity to go on this extravaganza. And they have done this by having lotteries drawn for the various age groups: 7 years and younger, 8 years and under 12, and 12 years and over. The majority of the kids and their parents entered the lotteries, and Marco and Nicholas drew 20 names from each age group. The winners would be allowed to take their parents and siblings on the cruise. And in early November, the draws were made by Big Nick's wife, Jane, and Marco's wife, Chelsea, along with 2 church ministers and some randomly chosen storekeepers at a very small hamlet called Skiport. At Skiport, the inhabitants of Bobbin Square have come to know it as the capital of Bobbin Square. Now everyone knows who will be going and who will not be going. But that's just fine with the folks at Bobbin Square. Everyone is happy and looking forward to this year's Christmas holidays. And this is how it was at this very moment. Part 2. Planning the Christmas Cruise. Marco and Nicholas and their wives have planned this cruise very carefully. The grand ship will set sail on December the 12th and return on the day after Boxing Day. This is so because the parents would like to spend New Year's at Bobbin Square with everyone else, and the kids would like the same. This ship will set sail from the port at Bobbin Square and will cruise along the southern coast of the world, and then it would head towards Disneyland in California. The kids will have a chance to see Disney World for a few days, but the main emphasis would be enabling them to cruise on the high seas and to see various landmarks along the way. The kids would have enough games and toys and other entertainment to keep them busy, and there will be some special activities as well. But the parents will not tell the kids until they are on the high seas, as they do not want to spoil the surprises. The parents want to make sure that their kids will have a chance to experience both winter and summer, so that in this case they've had to plan the route very carefully. Of course, the kids have been constantly bugging their parents to tell them what is going to happen at sea, but the parents have held firm. The kids are being allowed to bring along some of their own toys. Alexa will bring along her dolls, little Marco will bring along his game console, Shay will bring along her own stuff, and the older boys will bring along their iPads and other devices. The parents have given in to allow the dogs Flair and Flambeau to come along, but they have said no to bringing along cats Mustard and Mayo. These are treasured pets of Big Nick and his family. Mustard and Mayo will stay at home with Big Nick's parents. The parents have also planned for some very special sea activities to take place. And their dear friend Santa has given permission for some of his team members to be there. Snowbirds, dolphins, and mermaids to be part of the activities. He has also thrown in some surprises for the families. The plan is for this special ship to cruise the seas by night and to dock at certain landmarks in the early morning. The Disney visit will be first, so as to get it out of the way. And then the real fun will take place. It is estimated that the cruise will reach Disney by December the 14th, spend 3 days there, and then resume its course. Marco and Nicholas have hired very special and experienced sea captains for this event and have made very sure to enable the kids to enjoy Disney, knowing very well that they will only be able to see just a few features. So, special guides have been hired to meet the ship when it docks at Disney and to start the visit immediately. The plans have now been set, and the kids have only been told what they need to know, as the parents need to ensure that they concentrate on their schoolwork until they leave on the cruise. All is going to plan, and this is how it was at this very moment. Part 3. Who else is coming along? Marco and Nicholas have made it very possible through their lottery for others to be coming along, and it has turned out very well. Several less fortunate families will also be boarding the ship. There will also be some other adults as well, store and shopkeepers, pastors, and even some chefs, carpenters and masons, lifeguards and janitors, all with their families. Marco and Nicholas have also invited others who have made large contributions to the community at Bobbin Square over the past many years, many of whom will either be coming along on their own or with their partners, because their kids are now grown. But there are some others who will also be boarding the ship, and they are totally unexpected, at least by those at Bobbin Square. Yes, the kids and others will definitely be shocked, and this is the way that it is supposed to be. Marco and Nicholas only put this surprise together as a last-minute addition, and after a special request was made by a dear friend, they are certain that everyone is going to get along just fine. And now for more preparations. The ship is being decorated before boarding takes place. All kinds of very imaginative decoration. Christmas trees fully decorated with lights and ornaments, angels and presents, and stars adorning the tops of each Christmas tree. Large inflated balloons painted in all kinds of crazy colors, with crazy faces adorning them. Wreaths, mangers, and creches. Mini churches, mini Christmas villages, streamers, stars, gingerbread houses, and so much more. Tabletop train sets that constantly move around, aquariums with colorful fishes, and simulated tabletop rivers with boats moving around. Mini doll houses with families of dolls, and they are there with their furniture and tea sets, life-size teddy bears and clowns. And oh my gosh, too many other things to list here. Marco and Nicholas and their wives are really going out of their way to make this something for everyone to remember. And the dads are especially proud that the older boys, little Nick, Kristen, Tristan, and even Scotty, have participated in putting all of this together. And now time near for this grand ship to set sail. And this is how it is at this very moment. Part 4. The Special Ship. The ship itself was especially designed by Marco and Nicholas, with lots of help and input from several others, and even their dear friend Santa and his family have helped to put it all together. The ship has been outfitted with the latest and greatest technical devices to guide the ship, monitors that have both voice and braille output and input, same for control panels, and voice and braille commands can be used to communicate with both monitors and the control panel. There are even large print displays everywhere, and every elevator is a talking elevator, and they are outfitted with accessible touch buttons to go along. The ship is completely accessible with wayfinding facilities, and there are tactile signs on the walls and the doors, along with large print and neon signs. The ship itself is 12 decks in height, with each deck depicting an individual month of the year. All of the decks have been laid out in the same way, and rooms and bathrooms have been outfitted with the latest and greatest devices for safety and security. There are dining rooms with buffets on every deck level, as well as lounges and restaurants. All appliances are totally accessible, with microwaves labeled in braille and having voice output menus. The same for toaster ovens and coffee maker. Nicholas has also made sure to install an ice skating rink for those ice skating enthusiasts, as he himself is an avid ice skater. There is a rock climbing wall, a modern gym, spas and saunas, and any and everything that a ship could have. There are running tracks, artificial walking trails with artificial mechanical birds singing away. And there are trees as well, bumper cars and mini cars and mini bikes along with their tracks for racing, inline skating tracks and much more. The ship itself is sleek and streamlined, and whereas there are many things on board, everything has been made to scale so that there is no wastage of space. And finally, there are special kennels for Flair and Flambeau, Marco's dogs, and they are the only animals on board. Let's not forget those beautiful balconies that have been included on this ship that will allow passengers to enjoy the night sky. For the dads have some very special night surprises in store. Oh yes, some spectacular night show, and this is how it was at this very moment. Part 5. All aboard! And now it is the afternoon of December the 11th, and it's time for all aboard. Excitement is at its peak at the port of Bobbin Square, and even amongst the community at large. Everyone is in a very festive mood, and as the passengers line up to board the great ship, they are being given a send-off, with speakers blaring with Christmas songs and fragrances of baking goods wafting along the streets of Bobbin Square. Everyone is festive, smiling and greeting each other. The mighty ship stands tall and proud out in the stream, waiting for its passengers to board. Several greeters stand at the foot of the gangplank, and they are dressed in Christmas colors, while others are standing at the top, waiting to guide passengers to their designated places. First, the passengers will be guided to designated locations, and they will be told to wait until the ship has set sail. Then they will be invited to start exploring the ship and to mingle with each other. The dads have managed to ensure that all of this is orderly and that everything goes along smoothly. Even the dogs, Flair and Flambeau, are allowed to board in style. The Sumner kids and the Gleason kids board together, with the moms ensuring that these kids do not stray away from the program, so to speak. Shay has been put in charge of little Marco and Alexa, because everyone knows that these two rabble-rousers could certainly get into trouble at the drop of a hat. The older boys have been put in charge of making sure that Flair and Flambeau are safely installed in their kennels, and Dads Marco and Nicholas are busy giving last-minute instructions and supervising the overall scheme of things. Then it is time for some special passengers to board, and care needs to be taken for them not to be seen, as this is going to be a special surprise for everyone else. This group of special passengers board the very secret entrance, and they are escorted to their quarters, where they will stay until it is time for them to make their grand entrance. They are almost discovered by little Marco and Alexa, but the moms are just in time to stop them before they make the discovery. Oh, what a wonderful scene! Passengers boarding, others waving to them from the departure galleries, tons of food and goodies being loaded onto the ship last minute, and simply an air of merriment and festivity. And this is how it was at this special moment. Part 6. Cruising along. We can only say that the trip to Disney was one never to forget. The kids in particular had lots of fun and enjoyed the tours that were especially put together for them. They went on boat rides, saw much of the vast Disney complex, and got to meet most of their favorite characters: Minnie and Mickey Mouse, Donald and Daffy Duck, the characters from the various Disney stories, Snow White and her 7 dwarfs, Mulan and the Disney mermaids, Cinderella, and characters from The Lion King, and others. Little Marco and Alexa did manage to get into a bumper boat and get themselves lost, but thanks to Nicholas's special tracking system, they were found without too much difficulty and mildly scolded with a bit of a smile. Little Nick and Scotty had lots of fun riding the spaceships, while brothers Kristen and Tristan thoroughly enjoyed the helicopter rides, and Shay enjoyed hanging out with the mermaids and Cinderella. And then it was time to wave goodbye to Disneyland. And soon the special ship was cruising along on the high seas, passing by some very important landmarks along the way. At nights, the shows were simply spectacular, with Santa's dolphins, Sequin and Sea Jade and their friends, entertaining the passengers who were watching from the balconies. The dolphins simply outdid themselves. Dances, aquatic acrobats, and sea walks. The mermaids came aboard the ship and gave musical concerts, dancing, singing, and doing some high trapeze tricks. Jamie and Mallory entertained the passengers with their special entertainment. Then Snow Cone and Snowflake and their friends performed their air tricks that included air skating, air races, and they played air hockey and air soccer that simply wowed everybody. The stars aligned every night and came together to wink and nod at the ship. Other sea folks, such as whales, sharks, sea turtles, starfishes, and others, entertained nightly. Oh, it was simply magnificent, and everyone was simply having a magnificent time, by day and by night. The party did not stop. Marco and Nicholas and their wives were simply run off their feet, and those special guests also enjoyed themselves, but they were only supposed to make their entrance on Christmas Eve. Yeah. So while they partied on their own, the rest of the ship did the same. The special guests could not wait to join the rest of the passengers, but in the meantime they had enough to occupy themselves, and Marco and Nicholas made very sure that everything was well coordinated. The Sumner kids and the Gleason kids mingled with the other kids, and they had lots of fun on the various tracks. Alexa even managed to lose a tooth while ice skating, as she fell and broke it. But luckily enough, it was a shaking tooth that was due to come out. As for little Marco, he managed to sprain his right ankle, but this did not stop him from having fun. The two wives, Chelsea and Jane, spent lots of time making up Christmas boxes that were left at the various ports at night, while Marco and Nicholas spent lots of time with the other adults on board the ship and did their best to leave the navigating to the crew. So it was all well. So now all was well, and it was December 23rd, and Christmas Eve was simply waiting to make its appearance. And on the night of December 23rd, the kids were sent to bed a bit early so that the adults could prepare for Christmas Eve. Yes, a bit early, but this was the plan, and this is how it was at this very moment. Part 7. Drama on the High Seas. And these two little rabble-rousers could not wait to start things off. And as it was later remembered, they decided to take matters into their very own hands. Yes, little Marco and his sister Alexa, they had briefly talked to each other about planning a little escapade of their own, probably on Christmas Eve. And after they had been sent to their rooms the night before Christmas Eve, they had somehow managed to sneak out and meet each other. No one had noticed, as it had been thought that they were safely in bed. Little Marco took his sister's hand, and together they snuck away up to the 5th deck, where the mini boats were stored. They made sure not to attract any attention, and soon they were in the boat area. And there they plotted their little adventure. They both fell asleep sometime after plotting their little adventure, but it was little Alexa who had awakened her brother early on Christmas Eve, and together they proceeded. These two little ones thought that it would be a grand idea if they were to take one of the mini boats and then go for a ride to explore, and maybe they might meet some interesting folks. Marco had taken note of how to unhook one of the mini boats, and as he had watched Creason and Tristan, his two older brothers, do it many times. Yes, it was not that difficult to do, was it? Little Marco set about to unhook the mini boat. Then, with Alexa helping him, he slowly rolled the mini boat to the edge of the plank, and then lowered it into the water, taking care not to untie the rope that was securely holding the boat to a strong pole on the deck. Next, they put on life jackets, which were hanging on pegs nearby. Then carefully and cautiously, as Marco had seen his two older brothers doing, he lowered himself into the boat and then reached to help Alexa. No problem so far. And the two siblings grinned at each other as they settled themselves on the seats in the boat. Then came the most difficult part, untying the boat from the post. But little Marco had taken note of how his two older brothers had done it. Slowly and slowly he untied the slip knots, using the nearby knot removers that laid close by. It seemed to take forever, but then free at last. And then the little guy had picked up one pair of oars and had handed it to his sister. And then he picked up another pair for himself. He then whispered, quote, "Ready, set, go," unquote. And then they were off in the early morning with a slight breeze at their backs. The little sailors rowed hard and strong, but they did not go very far at first. After a few minutes, they stopped to consult with each other and to catch their breaths. But then, at first, they had not noticed anything different. The kids were totally enjoying the open sea, the cool morning, and the rising sun. That is until little Marco had noticed that the waves had started to get bigger. He did not panic because he had thought that it would only be a few waves at first. Then Alexa noticed that they seemed to be drifting. She tugged at her brother's sleeve and told him, and then he noticed that they seemed to be moving away from the ship at an increasing pace. Oh, what was going on? Little Marco tried not to panic because he did not want to alarm his little sister. But then a huge wave was upon them, and the boat had begun to list. Oh. They both screamed at the same time and then reached for each other. Little Marco had managed to hold on to one of his oars, but Alexa had lost hers. Oh no, these kids were in difficulty, and things were getting bad very fast. And this is how it was at this very moment. Part 8. The SOS call. Well, how likely could it have been that anyone would hear these screaming kids? Yes, they were about 100 yards away from the ship, but they were slowly moving away from the ship and had no clue as to what to do. So they continued to scream and scream, and now they were in full panic mode. The winds were getting stronger, and the waves were growing higher. But alas, someone had heard their scream. Thank God that Flair's and Flambeau's kennels were on the same deck as the boats, and they heard the kids screaming. And soon they had begun to bark. They barked and ran back and forth at their kennels. Their voices had grown louder and they had become frantic. For after all, Flair and Flambeau were the darlings of little Marco and Alexa. Or you would say that little Marco and Alexa were the darlings of Flair and Flambeau. and they were the beloved family dogs. So they barked beyond belief, leapt and thrashed around in their kennels, and they knew that the kids were in some sort of danger. They could not go to their rescue, but they were doing the next best thing. It seemed as if it had gone on for hours, but after about 5 minutes, Flare and Flambeau had managed to raise the alarm, and soon Marco and Nicholas and the lifeguards were on the deck. And soon after this, word had rapidly spread across the ship that little Marco and Alexa were in trouble on the sea. The lifeguards had heard the ruckus being raised by the dogs. So had the security team, and had sprung into action immediately. Then they had quickly alerted Marco and Nicholas, and they had come running from their beds. Oh no! What was going to happen next? And as Flare and Flambeau continued to bark frantically, more of the ship's guards arrived on the 5th deck. This was going to be a difficult rescue. Little Marco and Alexa were slowly drifting away from the ship, and now Big Marco and Big Nicholas had to think fast. They knew that the kids were practically at sea, with no idea as to what to do, and they did not even know that there were watchers on the deck. They continued to scream as their little boat continued to drift away. The sea had begun to grow more choppy, but not so choppy that something could not be done. The problem was finding a way to communicate with the kids, and now Moms Jane and Kelsey had arrived on the deck. And as they watched helplessly, the sun had begun to rise in the east, and this was how it was at this very moment. Part 9. To the rescue. Marco and Nicholas, Big Marco and Big Nicholas, had first thought that launching another mini boat to go after the kids would be the best thing. But it was quickly shelved when it was realized that this boat would also get trapped by the rising waves and the increasingly strengthening current. Something had to be done, and it had to be done now. And in their sequestered quarters, the secret guests had heard what was going on, and they did not hesitate to spring into action. What a surprise to everyone when it did happen. The secret guests quickly organized themselves. They composed messages and sent them over very secure lines. At the other end, the messages were received and read, and without hesitation, instructions were issued. The instant travel procedure was activated. The group of guests received and read the precise instructions. Then they proceeded. First, however, they communicated with Marco and Nicholas, and after a brief exchange, a rescue plan was formulated. The lifeguards and the security guards were also briefed and stood ready to help if needed. But the moms and the older boys were sent indoors to wait, as it was thought that it would be better this way. Twins Scotty and Shay were sent indoors as well, despite their objection, and it was Scotty who had to comfort his twin sister Shay. Flare and Flambeau were given mild tranquilizers, and soon they had fallen silent in their kennels. The older boys had been quite ready to take another mini boat to go after little Marco and Alexa, and they had to be restrained. and it was Nicholas who had managed to settle them down, telling them that it would be dangerous to do so. And it was Big Marco who had to settle down Scotty and Shay. What was needed was total peace and silence, so that everyone on deck could concentrate on what was about to take place. And this is how it was at this very moment. Part 10. The Unexpected Rescuers. Little Marco and Alexa had begun to grow hoarse from screaming and shouting, and they had both begun to sob uncontrollably. And as they held each other so tightly, with their heads on each other's shoulders, they did not see what was approaching. But Marco and Nicholas saw it. Marco used his special high-powered binoculars to scan the horizon and the area around the mini boat, while Nicholas used his very special electronic device to help him pinpoint the approach and to keep tabs on the mini boat. Some of the guards glued themselves to special monitors, while others also used high-powered binoculars to keep watch. And as the sun continued to rise quickly in the east, and as little Marco and Alexa continued to drift slowly away, something was about to take place. And when they appeared on the horizon, no one was prepared for the spectacular sight. Behold, there were 3 small sleighs painted in the Santa Claus colors, rapidly approaching from the north. They floated effortlessly and silently towards the drifting mini boat, staying at a safe distance overhead. And almost simultaneously, a group of mermaids had appeared out of the ocean and had quickly started to swim towards little Marco and Alexa, their long hair blowing in the breeze as they swam. As was reflected much later, the picture was a very surreal one, with the 3 Santa sleighs approaching in a line, and the mermaids swimming effortlessly. The mermaids reached the kids ahead of the sleighs and surrounded the little boat, making sure to stay close enough to it, and at the same time not to scare little Marco and Alexa. Then the 3 sleighs were overhead, and everyone waited to see what would happen next. Marco first saw Rudolph driving the lead sleigh. Then he could not believe his eyes when he saw who was driving the 2nd and 3rd sleighs. He whispered to Nicholas, and oh my gosh, both dads were literally beside themselves. Unbelievable. That was all the dads could whisper to each other. Then the others on the deck had noticed the drivers of the sleighs, and Marco had to signal to them to stay silent. They too were literally falling over each other. At a signal from the sleighs, the mermaids had closed in and had formed a tight circle around the boat. Then they rose in unison out of the sea and had started to sing softly to the kids. Marco and Nicholas and the others on the deck watched spellbound as the kids appeared to have fallen asleep. The mermaids had sang them to sleep. Then the mermaids had reached into the boat and had plucked the kids from their seats. They held them tightly and then had gathered together, making sure to hold each kid with tender care. They produced a raft and placed little Marco and Alexa on it. The kids were sound asleep, and Marco told Nicholas that his kids were safe, reassuring Nicholas that all was good, as Nicholas could not see his kids despite his special electronic device that was helping him to know what was going on. Then it happened so very quickly that even the onlookers could not explain what happened next. What did happen was that the driver of the second sleigh had stood up with a huge sheet spread out, and others in that sleigh were helping to hold the sheet taut. The driver in the third sleigh had done the same. Then the mermaids had carefully laid each kid on each of these two sheets, and then the sheets were carefully and expertly brought into the second and third sleighs. Then the mermaids had begun to disperse, and the sleighs had begun to rise slowly with their precious cargoes. The drivers of the sleighs had circled over the deck, waving to the onlookers. Then they were on their way. And this is how it was at this very moment. Part 11. The Magic Kingdom. And now the special ship was about to change course for a new destination. Marco and Nicholas gave special instructions to the crew. Now the ship was turning northward, slowly, very slowly. The ship turned north, and then it was on course for somewhere new. When Marco and Nicholas were sure that the ship was on its new course, they returned indoors to update the others. But many of them had already noticed that the ship had turned northward, and they had started to ask questions. This Christmas Eve was surely going to be different, but no worries. There was going to be some expected new excitement, and the dads told the passengers the bare minimum. They were reassured that all was well, and that little Marco and Alexa were safe and in very good hands, that they would soon be reunited with the ship. Jane, little Marco's and Alexa's mom had begun to cry and had to be comforted by her husband Nicholas. And Marco and Chelsea also comforted her, while the brothers Kristen and Tristan stood close by and did their best to smile, and the Sumner kids did the same. Then Nicholas had an idea and whispered it to Marco. Yes, it was a great idea, and the mystery guests would be brought out to meet the passengers ahead of time. And it was decided that the special guests would be introduced at the Christmas Eve gala. The passengers were allowed to relax and rest for the most of the Christmas Eve and enjoyed a lot of the ship's special goodies. Most of the kids had managed to sleep for a few hours, while the adults had busied themselves with preparations for the next phase of the cruise. Little Marco and Alexa were taken somewhere very special by sleigh, and the ship was going to get there soon after. These little rebel-rousers had slept for most of the journey while traveling by sleigh, but they had slowly awakened by mid-afternoon, and when they did, they were no longer in the sleighs. They slowly became aware that they were now in a very new and strange place, and they realized that they were no longer in the mini boat. Little Marco and Alexa sat up slowly and rubbed their eyes. They both stretched and yawned. Then they discovered that they were reclining next to each other. and it was little Marco who first spotted the neon sign. In bold, big letters it said, "Welcome to the Magic Kingdom." Little Marco grabbed his sister's hand and tried to rise, but they soon realized that they could not as yet. Standing beside their beds and smiling down at them was a very familiar face. Oh yes, it was the big man himself, Santa Claus, all dressed up and ready for action, and Mrs. Claus standing beside her husband. Santa Claus and Mrs. Claus had driven the second and third sleighs to rescue the kids, and now they were standing beside their beds. Santa Claus and Mrs. Claus took both kids by their hands and lifted them out of their beds. Then they were surrounded by Santa's elves and helpers, who beckoned them to follow them. The kids were taken to Santa's Magic Kingdom, where they ate to their heart's content before they were taken on a tour of the Magic Kingdom, and Santa and Mrs. Claus escorted them around and even allowed them to talk to their parents. What a reunion via video link. Nicholas and Jane were sobbing, while little Marco and Alexa kept apologizing and crying as well. Then it was the turn of the passengers on the ship to receive their own surprise, and none of them was prepared for what happened at the Christmas Eve gala. While the passengers were busy dining, the mystery guests had filed in, and then came the announcement. Oh yes, Santa Claus's brother, Sandy Claus, and his two cousins, Santa Stoyan and Santa Stefan, stood smiling at the crowd, who had begun to go wild with excitement. And then came some of Santa's reindeer and Santa's special kids. What an evening! Everyone partied, celebrated, and for the most part, they forgot about what had happened earlier. Even the dogs, Flair and Flambeau, were part of the celebrations, barking and playing with everybody. And then came the mermaids and the dolphins, followed by the snowbirds. And then Santa Claus and Mrs. Claus had brought little Marco and Alexa back to the ship. And this is how it was at this very moment. Part 12, Christmas Morning. No one could have desired more after that Christmas Eve. The adventures of little Marco and Alexa, the rescue, the Christmas Eve gala, the unveiling of the mystery guests, little Marco's and Alexa's visit to the Magic Kingdom, and most of all, the arrival of Santa Claus and Mrs. Claus. The drama on the high seas and the rescue had changed some of the plans that Marco and Nicholas and their wives had made. But that was okay. Santa and his crew had made Christmas morning one to remember. Santa's sleighs had dropped gifts for everyone on the decks of the ship. Santa and Mrs. Claus had come aboard and had mingled with the passengers, sharing joy, goodwill, and good cheer everywhere. And Santa Claus's brother and cousins had put on a show of their own, offering hot air balloon rides to the passengers, sleigh rides and sea raft rides, and so much more. And then it ended with Marco and Nicholas surprising Santa Claus, Mrs. Claus, and Sandy Claus and their cousins with a great surprise, along with the reindeer, the snowbirds, the dolphins, and the mermaids, and Santa's kids, elves, and helpers, with a grand spread of their own. The end. I hope you enjoyed this particular episode, the President's Christmas Cruise. A little bit different, but I also hope that you have been enjoying your holiday time and greeting each other and sharing with each other peace, joy, giving, receiving, everything that is good for the Christmas holidays. So we've got 4 more episodes to go, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon. Take care now, and ho, ho, ho!